Have I ever mentioned that I love skansens? Well, let's visit one more. Let me take you to Martin, to officially the largest museum of folk culture in Slovakia. And yeah, I know that's how you're feeling at the moment. What, another skansen? Now, first of all, I have to say a little disappointment. Most of the cottages were actually closed. What did not disappoint was the weather. It was beautiful. So, let's do it like this. With the beautiful views that we got on that day, let me explain myself a bit. Why so many skansens? Why so much about folk culture? And in order to explain it properly, in the introduction I mentioned a gentleman called Matej Bell. And he had 3 identities. Let's get a bit deeper into it. So, what about Hungarians? Well, for roughly 1,000 years there was no country called Slovakia. What we had was the Hungarian crown. And today Slovakia was simply called Upper Hungary. So, aristocracy was Hungarian. And there were also Slavs within the aristocracy, but they were mostly called Magyarons. So they were people who, even speaking Slovak, they felt, well, we would say today Hungarian. So Hungarian nobility. What about cities? A very important event is the 13th century Tatar-Mongol raids in Europe, and one of the biggest ones, Hungary, was the main victim. So the country is destroyed, completely almost. What to do about the economy? There's something called Ostsiedlung, the settling of the East. The Hungarian kings start asking, we would say today, German colonists, some people from today's Germany, to come in and build cities. And a great example is the city that we went to in the first part of folk culture. We went to Ružomberok, which is actually a Slovak version of the German Rosenberg, Hill of Roses. And again, in the cities you would find Slavs as well, but the important ones, well, they were Germans, we would say with the modern words. So you've got Hungarians in being nobility, Germans being the important people in the cities. But what about the peasants? Well, let's say 80% of population of any country for hundreds of years were peasants, and peasants were by far mostly Slovaks. So when it comes to the 19th century and the beginning of the question of national identity, the first, let's call it Slovak nationalists, they understand very well, if they want to create a Slovak nation, Slovak national identity, they do not search within aristocracy or cities. They search within the peasants, within the folk culture. That's why skansens in Slovakia are so important. That's why we talk so much about folk culture. It is impossible to understand modern Slovakia without its folk culture. So, let's have one more of our little nerdy bits. Have I mentioned already that when we go to museums, they're empty? We're the only ones? If I haven't mentioned it yet, I am mentioning it now. If I have mentioned already, I'm mentioning it now anyway. And mind you, it's awesome because, for example, you've got this beautiful wine press made of wood. And of course, if there's wine press, there is Vicky right next to it. And here is proof. But actually, look at the machine itself. It's awesome, right? So let me underline one more time. Those people had amazing talent very often. So we saw examples of carving. Here you've got some beautiful examples of pottery. Wicker work was also here on display, and that's pretty awesome. You've got the basic things like smithing, like working in stone. Even examples of such creativity, those guys had Princess Leia before Star Wars already. Yep. Traditional hairstyles all the way, plus the creative ones. And not only ladies, as you can see. As you can see, those people were indeed skilled in many a thing, with one little detail though. Most of them could not even read or write, which is pretty amazing, considering all the things they could do besides, right? But what's important for us in the modern age, what do? Oral culture disappears. Fortunately, another group of people that's forgotten, we had ethnology and ethnography. And thanks to them, the oral culture of the peasantry did not disappear. They were there to record it all. So I also record them here for you, so you don't forget about them. It is thanks to their hard work that we still can read some amazing stories. But here is a symbol of what Slovakia very often is till the very day. You do have the old and the new in one spot. And here, also an example of how folk culture influences art. We stumbled upon this exhibition by a certain Pavel Haiko, and definitely here you saw some folk, but his latest things are rather dark, and not only dark. His very latest, as an older gentleman, let me just leave it without commenting maybe. But also you've got some very famous Slovak modern artists, and the names are here. You can look them up on your own if you wish. But again, it's all folk influenced. And mind you, what you just saw right now are just a couple of examples. But this is something that's pretty much a daily thing while traveling around Slovakia. Folk culture is always present somewhere there, around the corner, very often in modern environs and in modern ways, but it's always there. And if all of that wasn't enough, if you like playing computer games, if you played The Witcher 3, well, here you go. This is the very beginning of the game. It looks like the White Orchard itself. So even for computer games, scansons are an important little bit, helping to recreate the village charm. On a side note, every channel gets a Geralt it deserves. Well, now that one important name was mentioned, let me finally tell you about the cherry on the cake. So let me take you to a village of Cierchowa, far, far away in the mountains. And mind you, through very narrow roads, and not only the woods but also beautiful meadows with some amazing views, and even smaller roads. But finally we arrive at the birthplace of the main national Slovak folk hero.
Here, my dear friends, is, well, a symbolical house really, but this is pretty much where officially a gentleman called Juraj Janosik was born. So let me tell you here a couple of things about him. The first issue we have is that 1688, there are 4 boys called Yurai Janoshik born in the vicinity. Very popular name and surname. But people in the end found out that in this place where we are at the moment, the right one was born. So, as you can see, in the mountains, I think no surprise, his family was poor. They lived off the land, and they were sheep herders. So tough and poor life. Our boy is 15, and a very important thing happens. See, all through the 17th century, Hungary officially an independent crown. In reality, kings were Habsburgs, and they were thinking of Hungary as their proper land. They were centralizing the government. Hungarians did not like it. There were plenty of uprisings. And the last one, 1703, so-called Rakoczy uprising. And our Yurai is 15. So officially, what Rakoczy said is all the people joining him will become independent. So it's not only Hungarian aristocracy. There are plenty of other ethnicities and groups who join, and Janoshik joins. So he's 15, he starts fighting alongside Rakoczy. This is how he learned of the military. 5 years on, 1708, there's a big battle at a city called Trencin, and Rakoczy loses. Janoshik got caught, sent to prison, not for long though, because he decided to swap sides, and he became actually a guard in a prison, where he met Tomasz Uhorczyk, his soon best friend and companion. So first of all, he helped Uhorczyk to escape from prison. Now, he was not caught, but soon wasn't a soldier anymore, as officially the Rakoczy uprising died down. And 1710, he's at home. But not simply at home. He still keeps in touch with Uhorczyk. So they met, and Yurai becomes a member of his gang. Here you have the proper local word, zbojnicy. Being in the mountains, of course, the pear homemade vodka had to appear.
No. It was just a coffee break. Just coffee. Let's get back to the story.
So Yurai became a zbójnik already. End of 1711, he is officially the part of the band, but very soon Uhorczyk decided to retire, and it is Yurai who becomes the leader. And a very good leader at that. All through 12th, he is robbing everywhere around, and obviously the wealthy ones, the aristocrats, but also traders, and actually even priests, Catholic or Lutheran, he didn't care, robs everybody he can. So his fame is growing for two reasons. First of all, it's not only the gang members really, not only the zbójnicy themselves, but their families. They would rob from spring till autumn, winter they're home. And their families, and I mean the extended ones, would help with all the merchandise. So it's not only the zbójnicy themselves, they become kind of wealthy, but the whole circle around them as well. And here, family could mean a village. So their fame is growing as kind of a Robin Hood type of people, because everybody's growing wealthy on them. Also, they did care about public relations, we would say today, because there were many bands, and all of them wanted to be the famous ones. So, of course, there's fame growing, and for one reason or another, it is Janoshik's fame that within 1 year only makes him into half legendary figure already, and maybe that was also the reason for his downfall. Plenty of people got angry. So there is the Austrian army, there are the mercenaries. They were paid 50 zloty of the time, which was quite good money, if they catch a live zbójnik, and only 25 for dead. They also, the local government, sent a spy. So by the end of year 12, Janoshik and his friend Uhorczyk are caught. But most probably because of a bit of bribery, they're out soon, not for long. Beginning of 1713, they are caught again. But the story of the trial and the place where Janoshik said goodbye to our world, that's a different place, that's a different town.
So magically we are in the capital of the region, Liptov, in Saint Michael, or simply today, Lipitovsky Mikuláš. The place was already known for being very particular on justice, and in this very building in front of you, Janoshik was supposed to be trialed. 16th and 17th of March 1713, and the first day begins all right. It's just questions, a bit more than 40 of them. Unfortunately, they didn't like what they hear, because they heard little and plenty of lies, really. So, if simple questions were not enough, second day he is questioned under torture. And you know, the typical of the time. So his skin is burned in places, he gets hot irons below his fingernails, and a broken arm or broken leg. In the end, of course, it doesn't really matter, because there can only be one punishment for him. He is going to be sentenced to death, and a very particular one. 2 kilometers outside of the old town, as it should be, you will find a place called Szibeniczki, a special place where people were usually hanged, but for Janoshik something a bit more important. He was hanged on a hook below the left ribs.
So we are back to Czerchowa, and it's still raining. I'm not doing the Statue of Liberty right now. I'm holding an umbrella, and behind me is something that you're going to see again from the bottom. Now here are some pretty cool views. So that's what you're seeing at the very moment. That's my views from the top. But let's continue walking, and let me give you a little epilogue, because the death of Janoshik is not the end of it all, because the person died, but the legend did not. And the legends well, they tend to be, especially if they're oral, and that's the case here, they tend to exaggerate, they tend to add all the pieces that were never there. So, for example, the whole idea that he was fighting for justice, he was robbing only the rich and giving to the poor. And of course, magical bits and pieces. He used to have this magical axe and a magical belt that gave him special powers. It's all nice, and it's oral legends told by the fireplace. But then 100 years pass. Beginning of 19th century, time of the Romantic movement and time of shaping of national identities. Now, Slovaks had a little problem. They did not have Slovak history, as there was no independent country. Of course, Slovaks did exist, but the country officially did not. So they had to either reach very far back in history, or they had to look for non-typical characters. They couldn't look for generals or politicians, so they looked for folk heroes. And there you go. Here is the legend of Janoshik right here for you, with great magical bits and pieces, and most importantly, the issue of liberty. He decided to go against the grain. He wanted to live a free life, not as a kind of slave labor for the Habsburgs. Plus, he was originally soldier of Rakoczy, who was an important person for the Hungarian forging national identity, which is great because beginning 19th century, Slovakia is still part of the Hungarian crown. So you've got a folk hero who is a Slovak, and he was fighting in the Hungarian movement, in the Hungarian uprising. Perfectly fine. So the poets, the main cultural and national people involved in shaping Slovak independence and Slovak national identity, they used a lot of Janoshik, and pretty much shaped the figure that we know today. And I say we know today because in the modern times, Janoshik again became a very important person. During communism, again, he was very politically correct. Once again, robbing from the rich and giving to the poor. But of course, modern times means, for example, TV. So Slovakia already had in the 30s a film, then during communism a film, and I think a series as well. In Poland, we also had a series, and it's still the very day one of the most loved TV series in Poland. How come Poland suddenly? Well, legends don't know borders, especially if we're talking about forests and hills and mountains. People living here, they didn't care about borders at all. And then there were no borders. 19th century, southern Poland was part of the Austrian Habsburg Empire as well. So not only a Slovak hero in the south of Poland in the mountains, he's kind of a heroic figure as well. So the very last bit of it is the modern times, when he became a marketing trick. Everything is Janoshik, hotels and restaurants and souvenirs and everything, including beer. Hopefully I will be able to show you what I mean by that. But we can honestly say that the legend of Janoshik is like the statue behind me now, overlooking the village. It's larger than life, literally and metaphorically.
And for the last bit, something super nerdy. If anybody likes playing computer games, and especially Europa Universalis 4, you can actually play a Slovak culture. I think now it's easy to understand why those are their two main national ideas. I also promised you something about beer, right?
One more little detail from Čerhova. Officially the first craft beer brewery in the mountains in Slovakia, unfortunately out of Janoshik beer today.
So that's it. We're leaving the topic and our new friend that we made behind. And another very important topic coming soon, plus a very particular culture you maybe wouldn't expect to find in Slovakia. See you in the next episode.